Hey, this is Thomas, and this is the presentation that I promised from English 1020 on the topic of arguments. And in this presentation, I'll be talking about the definition of arguments and also giving you definitions and explanations, examples of different kinds of arguments. You'll need these definitions and concepts for the Project 2 that you're working on, where you're evaluating historical claims in Sidney Fine's Violence in Model City. Let's start with the definition of argument. An argument is any statement that includes a claim and at least one good reason to believe that that claim is true. And when we talk about the word claim, we're talking about assertions, claims about the way that the world works. So let's take a look at some examples. Here's one using our favorite football team, the Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions will win 11 games this year because of the improvement of quarterback Matthew Stafford. I've color-coded here the different components of this argument, which exists in a single statement. The claim or assertion is in blue, that the Detroit Lions will win 11 games this year. It's not a fact. It's highly debatable that this is true. So it exists here as a claim or an assertion. The good reason, the reason why we think that the claim might be true, at least in this sentence, is in green. And it says of the improvement of quarterback Matthew Stafford. Again, this is not a fact, but it's some evidence. It's a reason to think that the claim that's in blue might be true. The word because, which is here in black, functions as a kind of link, a grammatical link between the claim in blue and the good reason that's in green. Now, this argument exists in a single sentence. But in a book or a magazine article or in a film, something longer, the argument is probably much broader and bigger than just a single sentence. The argument may occupy the entire length of the text. So here's an example. Here's a single sentence, and ask yourself, read it over, and ask yourself, is this an argument? I'll be quiet, and you can read the sentence for yourself. All right, what do you think? Do you think this is an argument? It is. It's an argument because it has both a claim and it has a good reason. So in this slide, the claim, providing more financial support for U.S. college students, is good economic policy. I've color-coded that in black. You probably saw this clue, the link, the word because, which I've color-coded here in orange. And then I've got the good reason. Why is it that we think that this claim might be true, or that it actually is good economic policy to provide this increased support for college students? That's in red. So yes, this statement, this sentence has all two components that we need. It has a claim and it has at least one good reason. Let's try one more example, and I'll let you read this to yourself. Okay, is this an argument? No, this is not an argument. This is just a claim. Congress should not raise taxes on wealthy Americans. Again, this is not a fact. It's a position. It's a claim or an assertion about how the world should work. But there's no good reason here. There's no language that tells us why we should not raise taxes on wealthy Americans or why we should raise taxes on wealthy Americans. This is only a claim. It doesn't have any good reason. So this is not a complete argument using our definition of argument. So let's talk about some definitions of different kinds of arguments. One of the most powerful and common kinds of arguments are arguments from definition, and these usually take the form of X is Y. And here's a famous example. Capital punishment is unconstitutional because it is cruel and unusual form of punishment. So see this very first sentence, capital punishment is constitutional. You can think about the word is here in that first phrase as a kind of equal sign, saying that capital punishment belongs in this other category, unconstitutional. Capital punishment is being defined as something else, as unconstitutional. We see that grammatical link because, and then after that we see a good reason. Why is it we should think capital punishment is unconstitutional? Well, it's because this language, cruel and unusual form of punishment, appears in the U.S. Constitution. There's a ban on this kind of punishment in the Constitution, and so this good reason is often used for to support the claim that capital punishment is not unconstitutional and should be illegal in the United States. Definition arguments are very powerful because if you can get your audience to accept your definitions, that makes it very easy for you to be successful with this kind of argument. The next kind of argument is what we call arguments from value or evaluation arguments. These are like definition arguments because we're saying that X is why, we still can think about that is as a kind of equal sign. But what distinguishes evaluation arguments from definition arguments is the inclusion of some sort of evaluative term. In the example here, we see the word good. Now, in the example with the matrix here, we see the evaluative term great. Now, this is a positive, both good and great are positive terms, but we could also imagine negative terms, negative evaluative terms like bad or horrible or terrible or something like that. In this example, we're talking about the science fiction film, The Matrix, and the claim is that it's a great science fiction film. Why? Well, there's our link because, and then we have this good reason. Why should we think The Matrix is a great science fiction film? Well, it's because of this criteria. It has a combination of fantasy, technology, a vision of the future. The challenge with evaluation arguments is to come up with criteria that your audience will accept. In this example, the criteria of what makes a great science fiction film, a combination of fantasy, technology, and some sort of vision of the future. Causal arguments are also very common. They usually take the form of X causes Y or X does not cause Y, or some synonym for the verb causes. So here's an example. Teaching adolescents how to use condoms leads to promiscuity because it creates the false impression that sexual activity is risk-free. So you see this first phrase, we see the claim, teaching adolescents how to use condoms leads to promiscuity. That's a causal claim. We're not using the verb cause, but we're using the verb phrase leads to. And then you see the grammatical link because, and then you see a good reason. Why is it bad to do this? Well, or because it creates the false impression that sexual activity is risk-free. That's our reason. And this sentence works as a complete argument because it has all two components. It has the claim, and then it's got the good reason. Proposal arguments are also very common. It takes the form of we should do X or we should not do X. You can make it a negative proposal as well. The example here is Wayne State should build more underground traffic parking. Should build more underground parking, so with that. Again, this sentence has both elements. It has a claim and it has a good reason. It also has the grammatical link because, which is helpful because it functions as a cue, but it's not absolutely required. And in proposal arguments, what we're trying to do is we're trying to bring about some future action or trying to stop some future action. But you also need good reasons. And good reasons in proposal arguments usually function as either benefits or consequences. So why is it that Wayne State should build more parking? Well, the argument is that will reduce traffic. The final type of argument we'll talk about here is rebuttal arguments. Rebuttal arguments are arguments that refute someone else's argument. Usually takes the form of X is wrong about Y, and then there's usually some sort of good reason. So here's my example. Michael Moore's criticism of the film American Sniper is faulty because, and then you could fill that in with your own good reason. So it looks like a evaluation argument at first, but we're really, notice what's being critiqued or what's being refuted. Michael Moore's argument. So whenever you're using an argument to refute someone else's argument, we usually call that a rebuttal argument. There's usually two main strategies that writers or speakers use to rebut an argument. You see these in political debates all the time. One is what we call refutation, which is when you explain why your argument is wrong. And then there's a counter-argument strategy, which is when you reinforce the reasons why you're right and your opponent is incorrect. Usually these two strategies are used together, but sometimes you see them used by themselves. Strategies in order to mount this rebuttal. All right, so those are the different kinds of arguments. As you page through Sidney Fine's Violence in Model City, at the sentence level, at the paragraph level, at the chapter level, at the book level, you can think about what kinds of arguments do you see Fine using? What kinds of arguments do you see in the evidence that he's supplying in order to support his argument? And you can use these definitions in your Project 2 paper as you identify the kinds of arguments that Fine is using and identifying and evaluating the kinds of evidence he's using. If you have any other questions, let me know. Send me an email, talk to me in class, but we will talk to you soon.